Well, welcome everyone. My name is Beverly Cates, and I'm in on 𝘔𝘢𝘴𝘵 Tricia Parado on Mastering the Drop. And I have a special guest here today, Rodriguez. She's our special guest, and we'll be talking a little bit about stress and stress management in our personal lives as it relates to our life structure. But first of all, let me just introduce myself again. My name is Beverly. I am an affiliate of Turning Leaves Recovery, Wellness, and a recovery coach. I am also credentialed under Turning Leaves as well through the Academy. And I'm very happy to be a part of this program. I've learned so much, and I'm excited to talk about stress management today. So, Morelda, as we talk about stress management and how it relates to our life, there's so many different ways that we can address stress. And I want to, before you introduce yourself, I just want to just talk a little bit about some, from my perspective, how we can approach stress and some of the things that we can do to even recognize it. The first thing I think of is the recognizing of stress. Do most people recognize when they're under stress? Is the first thing that I think of, or do they allow it to just become a part of their lives? But as we discuss, and maybe we can also identify some areas of stress, because stress can come because your finances are out of order. Stress can come because you don't want to go to work today. So they're not really quote unquote big things that bring on stress. Sometimes it can be those things, such as not wanting to go to work, or getting the child in daycare, or whatever that relates to your, whatever is important to you. So go ahead and introduce yourselves to our audience, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Beverly. And I'm delighted to be here. My focus in what I do is twofold. I do body work as a massage therapist, and I also am a health and wellness coach. More specifically, I work in the grief space. So I'm a grief massage therapist and a wellness coach. And I work with people who are really struggling with their health while they're going through their grief journey. So I help them stay afloat and basically create coping mechanisms or resolve where they're feeling stuck and it's taking a toll on their health. And when you have a healthy body, grieving becomes just a different experience. It is less about suffering and more about just the mourning.
I think that is, we were speaking earlier, I just think it's such a unique product that you serve, and I think that there are a lot of people out there that would welcome that. I personally monthly go to a body masseuse once a month, and just the relief and the stress relief that brings me from that, I don't even take into the account what I'm going through. It just feels good to my body. So you're speaking of it from an even more emotional perspective. Is that correct?
I am specifically, yes. In this situation, I'm giving the emotion a name. I'm really not speaking to how it personally feels in the body, because that really comes once I can get someone's attention by saying the word grief and really calling it out and raising their awareness to it. And then when they are in a moment of pause, I can then say, does it feel like this or that in your body? And then help them associate that correctly with grief. Because I think a lot of times people are all over the place with their understanding of grief and loss. They're also all over the place with their understanding of stress. Mm-hmm. And if you were to ask me about coping with stress, the way I look at it is, if you're riding on your car on a highway, mm-hmm. you want to be on the highway. You don't want to sort of hit the guardrail and ride the guardrail forward. So coping mechanisms are sort of boundaries as to what you are able to handle in that moment, whether it is mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. It's what you are either capable of by way of experience, by way of tools and resources, by way of support. But if you don't have this and you try to muscle through, which what people tend to do, our society has made it okay to ride the guardrails.
Wow. That's
the best way to put it.
That's a great way to put it. And it helps me visualize exactly what you're communicating. So when you speak of grief, Merelda, what forms of grief in particular, or just categories?
I think it's best for me to kind of share how I define grief, because that gives people a really good understanding and foundation. I define grief as a loss of attachment to a person, pet, possession, lifestyle, or identity. So it's a loss of attachment. So we are attached in many ways, but this type of attachment that I'm talking about is very much a biological attachment, right? Whether it's the baby to the mom, or if you're with your loved one, or maybe you finally found the house of your dreams and you're in love with the living room, right? It may be your lifestyle. You love to go get a massage once a month. And now all of a sudden you are in a situation you cannot do that anymore. That loss, you're going to be disappointed, and disappointed is a lighter version, if you will, of grief. It's really a light shade of gray, and then grief is that dark shade of gray, and there's plenty in between. But what I deal with is everything that is a biological manifestation. So when I speak of grief, I'm talking about the person that's feeling their chest tighten. They're feeling their stomach churn. They're feeling their jaws clenching. They're feeling their brain racing around. They're feeling an inability to move, or they start to tremble from fear. So these physical, biological expressions is really what I do, because that's sort of like you're on the highway and you're starting to veer off into the guardrail. And that's where I come in and I say, let's manage these biological expressions so that we can get a better handle of what the mind needs.
Very interesting. So does it start with, do you receive the clients in for just the biological manifestation, or do you continue that on after they come in? Do you have like more of a coaching experience or counseling experience with your clients, or does it just stop there and then they come back when they feel they need it again? How does that work in your organization?
So it really depends on where the person is physically. And by that, what I mean is I am located and based in Chicago. So my massage practice is in Chicago. So if someone wants a grief massage, they've got to be in the Chicago area to be able to come into my office, right? Now, that same person, whether they're in Chicago or not, if there's somebody anywhere out in the world and they need some coaching, some wellness coaching, and they're struggling with grief and they're experiencing the manifestations in their body, I will coach them on Zoom, online, virtual. So I have two aspects to my business. It just depends on whether the person, now my Chicago people, I can also coach online, and they love it because they can literally come get the massage, and then the next week they can, find me online. So that's, I say, the only benefit to people living in Chicago, or the only like plus point for people living in Chicago. But if they're just looking for the coaching, it can happen virtually at any time.
I'm just interested just to know the range, of persons that you have served. I'm sure you've served individuals who are truly grieving from the loss of a loved one, but to what extreme does it go from that extreme to what would be the next level? of the type of client that you serve,
So
going from that to.
so the type of clients that I've worked with so far
Mhm.
have experienced physical losses, like violent losses.
Mm.
Either when I say violent, I mean murders,
Yeah.
suicide. And then I've had losses where people are, my oldest child is going to college kind of loss,
I had that one. Yeah.
right? So the first time a child goes off into the
Yeah.
out of the home, they're not staying at home and just going to class. They're like physically in another state, right? So that
Mhm.
first experience of loss, or sometimes it's the empty nester, the last kid is gone to college and that
Mhm.
happens. There's also people that have lost in this pandemic their businesses,
Yeah.
their personal freedoms, like spouses and children all having to be in a very confined space with very little freedom and having to do the homeschooling and the office zooming and the everything
Yes.
that and there's no daycare. So that loss of personal freedom
Mhm.
has taken a toll on many people. I've also worked with people who are contemplating divorce.
Mhm.
That's a different kind of loss. And most recently, and this is where I think some of my newer work is headed in the direction of women who are mostly single. Maybe they're divorced, maybe they've chosen to be single, whatever the situation is, but they're currently single and they're in their 50s and they wake up and they feel like they have no idea what their purpose is. And
Yeah.
they are suddenly facing, especially when they're looking at their retirement plans, if you will, and they're starting to go, wait, what? I've got 4 years till I retire, or 5, or how did that happen? And what do I have to show for it? And there's all of a sudden this freeze response because they think that all is lost. Like, I haven't anything to show for it. I have no legacy. I
Mhm.
have no. And what's interesting about these women is that they have the money, right? So they've been
Mhm.
religiously saving, they've been putting money into the retirement, they have their emergency fund, they've got all of this. So I say that not to say that these are affluent clients. That's not it at all. I say
Right.
that because sometimes people have the impression that if they had all the money, they'd be okay.
Mhm. Yes.
And that is so not
This
true,
is not true.
because you now
Mhm.
have these women who have all of that and they're waking
Yeah.
up and finding that their soul is like going, when is it
Yeah.
my time? And now they're
Mhm.
grieving that loss, as I call it, of unfulfilled dreams or lack of legacy
Mm.
dreams. Or, I'm sorry, lack of legacy losses.
That is so interesting. I found myself in a couple of those statements that you made there. Um, my child going off to college, and little did I know, Marilda, that I was experiencing that it was a form of grief that I was going through. I didn't even think of grief, but it had always been just he and I. And first of all, high school. Once he got to the ninth grade, it was over. It was like, okay, I'm buying a cap and a gown. And so he was graduating from high school, and I just felt this big hole in my heart, and there was nothing I could do about it. Um, so I went out and got a puppy. you
Those
know,
always help. You can mother something else.
I got a puppy, and I still it didn't connect. That now until now, I was actually going through a form of grief, and that puppy, who I still have today, and is in charge of everything in my life and everyone else around him. It still serves as that consoling piece for me. I do know that, but now I know that he was truly there, brought into my life so that I could have something else to mother, because the one child that I have was gone, and maybe in my mind I was thinking, I I'm not a mother anymore, maybe. And you really, as a parent, you really grow attached to your role as a parent, and you don't realize it. I didn't realize it until that role was actually somewhat diminished by him going off to college. So that's enlightening that you share that. I was going to ask you also on another note, how would you assist someone that comes into your facility for that type of assistance, like I just described?
Right. So like, let's say you and I were connected by Tricia, and you are a potential client and you want to know what I'm doing and you want to know how the session is going, where I'd focus. So I would get your story. So the first thing is, if you noticed, I said before that loss of attachment to a person, pet, lifestyle, possession, and identity. And here's the thing, people don't know what, when I say you need to change your identity, it sounds like I'm speaking, you know, a completely different language that they were never schooled in, because nobody thinks of themselves in an identity or a role. We just kind of say, I'm a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a this, I'm a that, right? But we don't really take the time, because they're so blended in. If you're a wife, and then you're a mom, and then you're a teacher, and then you're this and you're that, and it's all kind of blended in, it's one you. But what becomes really important is when one of those identities is switched, changed, gone. Who are you without that specific identity? And who do you want to be in your new identity? And this is a conversation, it was very interesting. I had just, before I can answer your question, I had this question, I had this conversation with a friend of mine last weekend, because she was like, why doesn't anybody give us a class between you're a mom of a high schooler and now you're a mom of a college student? What happened in between? I came home one day and then my child was gone the next day. And so it's that identity. Now, if you had come to me in his senior year in high school and I'd had this conversation, that hole in your heart might still be there, but it might not have hurt as bad, or you might be able to find your resources to comfort you from day to day. So this transitions into, if you come into work with me, I'm going to get your story so that I can identify. It's kind of like being in a mall and it says you are here and JCPenney is here and we've got to figure out how to walk to JCPenney, right? So I would first get your here story.
Yeah.
And from there, it would give me a sense of where your mind's at, what resources you already have, what your sleep is like, what your food plan is like, what is your movement like, and does it match what your body needs in that gap, and will it match who you are going to be in your next iteration?
So that goes to the changing of identities that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, it's a change. Your change in identity is going to change your biology. It's going to change pretty much, I mean, everything you do. If you have an emotion involved, it's going to involve your biology in your body.
Okay.
So it's understanding how emotionally neutral, or I don't really, even though it goes into terms of emotional intelligence, I don't want to kind of give it a term and like leave it over there, right? I really want to make it more relatable. So let's say you have never experienced a big loss before and your heart is just hurting and your chest is so tight and you're, you know, people ask you your name and you think you're going to sob, right?
Yeah.
That feeling, we want to make sure that you're able to handle that and bring the intensity down to more neutral and not so triggered. And that's a day by day. And you can help that with the foods you eat. You can help that with proper sleep. You can help that with other mindset, what we call emotional hygiene techniques.
Yeah.
just daily calmness, stillness, and just even being in the discomfort is an exercise towards coping.
That's interesting. Being in discomfort is an exercise toward coping.
Yeah, because you're in discomfort because you've never handled it before. So it's like saying, I've never used my biceps before. I'm not going to have Popeye muscles if I just have never used them before. And the next day I go take a pill, right? That's not going to happen.
Right.
I've got to do the reps. So you got to put in the daily reps of your wellness to get to the new identity that is a lot more resilient and is no longer triggered by what was triggering the old identity.
Do you label do you label the identity? So am I saying that?
Yes.
Okay. So
I do, because when someone talks to me, I will say something that's like, Bev, so you're at Bev 2.0 now. What does Bev 3.0 look like? Or if someone's, if I really need to get them out of their heads, I will say, all right, what do we want to call this identity? What's her name? And the person will say, okay, that's Susan. Okay, and who do you want to be? I want to be Jane. Okay, well, how is Susan different than Jane? What does Jane do? So it gives them a sort of, it's like a Barbie doll dress. You can do all the cutouts and put the Barbie doll dress, which one looks best.
The paper doll.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that. Do you want the blonde hair? Do you want the brown hair? Do you want the, wrist bracelet? Do you want the necklace? What do you want?
Okay. Absolutely wonderful. I also, the other thing that I was gonna, when I turned a certain age, okay, I'll go ahead and say, when I turned 45.
Oh, you look at 45.
Well, I'm older than 45 now, but when I turned 45, something happened, Merelda, within me. It was almost like I went to sleep at 40 or even, I went to sleep at 40. And today I woke up and I'm 45 and then something happened. And I still to this day, I guess I call that my way of coping with some people say when they turn 40, they go through these changes. Well, it didn't happen to me at 40, but it did happen later on, like at 45. And I felt like I lost so much. I don't know. And I don't know if I've even coped to get to a place of where I've been delivered from this, but I felt like I had not accomplished. It was like time went away from me and I could not find what I had done that I wanted to do. It was almost like I wasn't complete. I did go through that phase and maybe it was a hormonal imbalance or something, but I actually went through that. And I know that a lot of women endure those type of emotions. So that's why I brought that up. How would you say the best way is to cope with that? Because I actually felt like I lost time, like I hadn't done all the things I wanted to do.
So looking back, at my own journey, I was in corporate America. I'm going to go back to when I was 35. And I had my first layoff. And I worked in human resources, so I actually typed up my own layoff letter. So, and I had never been in a situation where I never had a job lined up. Like I knew I was going to find something, but this was bad. This was when there was the .com bust. I lived in Atlanta and it was really bad at the time. And nobody was hiring. And so even though I had left jobs before, I was always able to say, I'll find a job. But this was a really bad time and I was unemployed and it was really taking its toll to where my hair started falling out from stress. Okay. And then I found this job I loved the job. I actually moved from Atlanta to New York. And then the job got really, really stressful beyond my ability to deliver anything. And I'm a pretty resourceful professional, but I was just, I felt I was in quicksand. And no matter what I reached for, I was still sinking. And that burned up my body's resources so fast that I actually burned out at the age of 40. So I was not mentally okay just before my 40th birthday. And it took me a year to even understand that this was burnout. This was terrible. I couldn't even remember my name. I would cry at the drop of a hat. The lights in New York City just were overstimulating that I would cover my eyes in the bus because I couldn't look up at the lights. And I moved at that time to Chicago, and I reinvented myself, meaning one, I got out of corporate America. Two, I embraced the massage therapist side of me because I had two careers concurrently. I didn't burn out because I had two careers. I burned out because I was working so hard in what I thought was the primary job. And I was working outside of my values. I was people pleasing to the max. Wow. I was pleasing my dad, and I was not living for me. I was living for the what ifs. What if I lose my job? What if this? What will they say? What are they saying behind? I saw them talking when I walked by. I was living for that. So when you ask me, what would I tell people? What I have learned is that I would first come home to myself, because innately I have survived a lot and I am extremely resourceful, but I forgot all of that and I gave away my power. I gave away my values to other people, and I had to rope that all in a very painful journey, bring it all back home and say, go inside yourself. So it's almost like, you know, you got to go to your own church.
Yeah.
You got to go to your own church, and you got to
and be your own preacher.
Exactly right. And you got to, like, you know, your affirmations, your meditation, your visualization, your I am statements. I mean, right next to me is my mirror, and the mirror is covered with all kinds of things with my dry erase marker. So I write things, I motivate myself, I do all these things all over the place because the mirror's right there and it's in an area that I walk by all the time. So to tell someone, you know, they need to really, really take stock of themselves. But what happens is so many people are just not even, they don't know their values. So they don't even know their own starting point. Because they don't know their own starting point, they go out and shop and see who they can please or be like in order to fit in. What all this is doing is it is whittling away at self-trust. So now they don't trust any part of themselves to make any good decisions. They don't even believe that they're choosing what's best for them because they're doubting that. And when you do self-trust, you put your nervous system in 100% fight or flight.
Oh my goodness.
So in order to be able to help yourself, you have to, I have, you know, and I work with women like this where there's many crying sessions. There's many crying sessions because they are so afraid to trust themselves. I mean, I think they would go sit on an alligator faster than they would trust themselves.
Unbelievable.
And this is the journey we're on because it is creating problems in their sleep. It is keeping them stressed out. It is putting them on the path of autoimmune conditions. Autoimmune conditions in women is on the rise. The sleep epidemic is in full swing. So these are the things, you know, it's always about, hey, can we get a sense of where's your nervous system, and why is it so out of sync at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have an alert to all the women and some men.
Mhm.
Stop ignoring these things when they occur. I'm guilty of ignoring. I'm thinking, okay, it's just I need a dog, or it's just not being able to identify with what the real issues are. And then we bring on so many other things, by ignoring what we really need to give attention to. And I do agree. Women sometimes tend to be always trying. Well, I can say I fall in the category of always trying to please others before we please ourselves, or satisfy others, or take care of others before we do that for ourselves. And I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure I'm speaking for others as well. So we have to stop and give these things, these emotions, attention. And I know we're closing up. I could talk about this all day. I find it so very interesting. You've been wonderful. But tell everyone how the name of your business, and how we can reach you, Merelda.
You can, so Mike, I've whittled down everything. It's very simple. You can go to my website, which is 𝘠𝑚ereldarodriguez.com. And I also have a YouTube channel called Merelda Rodriguez Grief, Massage, and Wellness. And you can find my YouTube channel. There's just a few videos on there, but more are coming as I really clearly define the kind of work that I want to pursue from here on out, because like I was saying earlier, grief is a big topic. And having been through it's kind of like being a doctor and being on rotations, different rotations. And I've done my little rotations. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about what I have found from all these different rotations. So those videos are coming. So that's probably the best place to find me. If people are on Facebook, I do have a fan page. It's the same thing, Merelda Rodriguez Grief Wellness, Grief Massage and Wellness.
That is awesome. I'm definitely going to check you out, and highly recommend that everyone else does too. We'll tag it below. Merelda, thank you for joining us today, and we really appreciate you, and I hope to see you very, very soon.
Thank you so much, Beverly. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Okay. Have a great one. Bye-bye.